So to find this practice test, you can search into Google College Board SAT Practice Test 9, and that should be the top result. If it's not, you can use the method from the other videos. This one is going to cover the calculator portion, so you're going to start on page 46.
So we're on test 4. We have 55 minutes for these 38 questions. There's a series of formulas that you have access to down. Number 1 is a two-step equation. If we subtract 3 from both sides and divide by 3, we get that x is equal to 8. B. For number 2, we see that 1 cubit is equal to 7 palms, and the Great Sphinx statue is 140 cubits long. So we can write this out as a proportion. As long as we label our units, then we don't make any mistakes on which one goes on top and which one goes on bottom. And here we go. The answer is just going to be whatever 140 times 7 is. Now I'm looking at my choices, and D is the only one that would be anywhere close. So here in 3, the first thing we do is multiply both sides by 5, and we see that 2n is equal to 50, and we can just subtract 1 from both sides. So we see 2n minus 1 is equal to 49. B. Number 4, the square root of something will never be negative, unless we're talking about an imaginary number. So right off the bat, because we're plugging in a negative 4 over there, we see that's not a solution. If we actually did the math, we would see this is the square root of 16, which is just 4, and that's not equal to negative 4. So 5 and 6 use this graph that shows the temperature of a cup of coffee after it was removed from its heat source. So the temperature is gradually going down and probably equalizing here at room temperature. Of the following, which best approximates the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit of the coffee when it was first removed from the heat source? Well, if we look at our x-axis, we see a 0 here, which means when it was still on the heat source. And if we follow that up, we see a dot, which is somewhere between 180 and 200, and it's really close to 200. So our best choice is D. 6. During which of the following 10-minute intervals does the temperature decrease at the greatest average rate? So there's 4 choices here. Between 0 and 10, which is this drop. Between 30 and 40, here. Between 50 and 60. Or between 90 and 100. And the blue line has the steepest incline. It's the greatest average drop. 7. A geometry problem. They tell us that x is 100, so this is 100 degrees. And they do tell us on our formula page that the sum of the measures in degrees of the angles of a triangle is 180. So if I think about this missing angle, it's 100 plus 20 plus whatever this angle is, we'll call that x, equals 180. So if I subtract a little bit from there, I can figure out that x is 60. So if this is 60, this is also 60. Those are vertical angles formed when 2 straight lines cross. Then I do some very similar math here on the right. 60 plus 40 plus y equals 180. And if I subtract 100 from both sides, I get that y is equal to 80, which is C. So number 8 shows the total cost for a cab ride. And as you travel more miles, the price goes up. But just accepting or requiring a ride has a flat fee as well. So when we think about slope-intercept, this is going to be the price per mile, the slope, and our b value is going to be our initial one-time flat fee. So we can see that that's $3, because that's where it crosses the y-axis. And then how much do we go up as we go over 1? We're going to go up $2. We could track that by saying up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1, or we could actually plot some points and use the formula. Either one would work. So when they ask what's the cost for each additional mile, that word each is a pretty strong clue that we're talking about slope. And the answer is A, $2. Number 9, customer purchases at a gas station. Did they buy gasoline, beverages, both, neither, etc.? They want to know, what's the probability that the gas station customer selected at random on that day did not purchase gasoline? So there were a total of how many customers? 135. We're selecting them at random. And how many didn't purchase gasoline? That would be 50. The total of those, some that purchased beverages and some that didn't. So 50 out of 135, D, is the answer. So 10 is another statistics problem where we start off with 336 students, and a quarter of them were freshmen and a third of them were sophomores. That means that we had 84 freshmen. You just take 336 divided by 4. And 112 sophomores. Again, you take 336 divided by 3. When they say half of the remaining students were juniors, that's half of 140. So that means 70 were juniors. And then how many were seniors? That's also going to be 70. Because if half of that 140 were juniors, the other half were seniors. D. So the next one, number 11, it's a proportion problem. The ratio from A to B is equal to C to D. So we are given 3 of the heights. We cross multiply and solve. So 20 times x and 54 times 12. And when you divide both sides by 20, you get 32.4. A. So there's a vent that's 3.1 miles below the sea surface, and they want to know how many kilometers is that. So you could set up your conversion as 3.1 miles per vent, and then the conversion, we want to make sure that the miles are on the bottom so that they cancel out. And then it pretty much becomes 3.1 divided by 0.6214, which gives you 4.988, so on, so on, so on, which is pretty much just 5. 13 is a systems problem with inequalities. So you could do this formally or informally. Let me show you what both look like. Informally, I can plug in my answers. I know that I have to have so many 120-pound packages, and then I have to carry at least 10. So if I went with choice A, that's 240 pounds, because I have 2 of these at 120, and then the other 8 are the 100-pound packages. So plus 800. Is that less than or equal to 1100? And same thing with the next one, number 4. So 4 times 120 would be 480. And there's 6 packages to go, so plus 600. Is that less than or equal to 1100? C, 5 times 120 is 600. And there's 5 packages left, so plus 500 is less than or equal to 1100. And the last one, 6 times 120 is 720. And of the 4 remaining packages, they each weigh 100 pounds. So which of these is true? What's the largest number that makes this true? C actually gives you exactly 1100. And if you go below that, you go above 1100. So C is the best choice. This is a practical way where you don't get tripped up by creating a formula that's wrong or having an inequality in the wrong direction. But let me show you the other way. The other way would be to assign a variable to each of the different packages. So we'll call the 120-pound ones A and the 100-pound ones B. We've got to have at least 10, and their combined weight has to be less than or equal to 1100. So we can solve for B, which we want to minimize and make as small as possible. Since it's greater than or equal to, we'll just choose 10 minus A. And we'll substitute that in up here in this earlier inequality. And we can distribute and subtract and combine like terms and divide, and we'll find that the 120-pound packages, we have to have 5 or fewer. So 5 is the most. Both methods work. I like the first one. 14 is a linear problem masquerading as an exponential problem, because we often see this word depreciates with exponential growth or decay. But since it's depreciating by the same amount each year, there's a slope. It's linear. So if our starting value is 120,000, we can rule out A right away. And it has to be one of these that has 120,000 as a starting value. So then we have to figure out the slope. Well, it's depreciating, so it's going down. So we can rule out C. And then it's just a matter of figuring out which is the correct slope, negative 9,000 or negative 30,000. So if we end up at 30,000 over 10 years, well, what's the difference between these two? The difference is 90,000. And if we divide that by 10 years, that's how we get 9,000, and it's going down. B is your best choice. So 15, we have 2 coordinates, and we have to turn this into an equation of a line. Normally, I would say, use the slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. But notice this point right here, 0, 1. That tells me that's where the line crosses the y-axis. That's my b value. Which one of these have a b value of 1? This is the only one. You could just stop there and be done. So let's start by expanding these binomials, and we end up with 4ax squared, 4ax, negative 4x, and negative 4. Then I'm going to bring down the negative x squared plus 4, and I might notice that the minus 4 and the plus 4 cancel each other out. And now I have some x squared terms, and I have some x terms. So I'm going to factor out everything in front of those. So here I take the 4a and the minus 1. And then for the x, I'll break it down into 4a and minus 4. And we're told that this whole thing has to equal bx, where b is a constant. And you might notice that there's an x squared here on the left, but there's not an x squared on the right. So this tells us that 4a minus 1 is equal to 0. And if that all cancels out, we also know that 4a minus 4 is equal to b, as those are the coefficients in front of x. So let's solve the one on the left. We have 4a is equal to 1, a is equal to 1/4. If I plug that in here, I have 1 minus 4 is equal to b. So negative 3 is equal to b, which was the second one there. For 17, I have these two different equations, and then I want to know what is the value of 2w plus 3t. So I could try to solve these for w and t separately and then plug these in, and that would probably work. But if I'm looking at elimination, and I add these straight down, I get 6w plus 9t is equal to 39. And I'm noticing that if I divide everything by 3, what do I get? 2w plus 3t is equal to 13. Bit of a shortcut. It shows up all over the SAT, math problems like this. Of course, if I wanted to solve this in a more traditional way, I might notice that if I multiply this entire top equation by negative 2, I get negative 4w, which helps to cancel out the w's, and negative 8t and negative 28. I add straight down, I divide by negative 3, t is 1. So I can replace t with 1, like in this second equation, and then I get that 4w is equal to 20. So w is equal to 5. So then if I plug in 5 and 1 into 2w plus 3t, I also get 13. 18 through 20 use the nutrition facts from this crunchy grain cereal. They specifically mention there's 180 milligrams of potassium, which is 5% of the daily allowance for adults. And here for 18, we're talking about what percent of an adult's daily allowance of potassium is provided by X servings. So if each serving covers 5%, P is equal to 5X. So for 19, super grain is 240 calories per cup. And we see over here that for crunchy grain, 3/4 of a cup provides 210 calories. So if we divide this by 3, we get 70, and we multiply it by 4, we get 280. So for crunchy grain, it's 280 calories per cup. And there's a variety of ways to do this from here. You might notice that if it was half and half, there'd be 260. So since we have 270, there's more of the crunchy grain than the super grain. That rules out D. And if you wanted to, you could use this method, multiplying each by 3/4 and 1/4, so 2/3 and 1/3, or 7/8 and 1/8. Those come from the answer choices, and you can find that this is the answer. But I think if you go back to 260s in the middle, and we want to be at 270, well, that's in the middle of the middle. So we're talking about quarters. So B is your answer. 20. Which of the following could be the graph of the number of calories from fat in crunchy grain cereal as a function of the number of 3/4 cup servings of the cereal? So we see here that 50 of which are calories from fat. So every time we add an additional 3/4 cup serving, we have 50 more calories from fat. So our slope should be going up, not down. It's not staying the same. And the problem with B is the intercept. If you have 0 servings, how do you have calories from fat? A is the best choice. So for 21, when they say a y-intercept of D, that means when x equals 0, y is equal to D. So that also means that D shows up over here in this h of x side. So if we plug in a 0 for each of the x's, we see that -3 is equal to D. That's not true. 0 is equal to D. That's not true. 0 is equal to D. That's not true. But 3 to the power of 0 is just going to be 1. So this choice D will give me that D is equal to D. For 22, we have 15 horses, and they have a variety of weights. And then the lowest reported weight is 10 pounds less, we found out. It was a mistake. So what value remains unchanged if the four values are reported using the correct weight? Well, the range is going to change a lot. That's max minus min. So we know it's going to go up by 10, as the minimum is 10 less. The variance, or standard deviation, will change. It's going to go up. The average, or mean, is going to actually go down. And the median is the only one that will not change, because we don't have any new values, so we'll have the 7 smallest, the median, and then 7 bigger than that. Doesn't matter if we swap out one of those values. 23, there's a show. At the end of the show, 28% responded yes, 70% responded no, in terms of did they agree with or support this federal policy. So the percentages might not add up to 100% because some people might not be sure. So that's not necessarily true. You don't have to have 50% and 50% to have, representative data. And the viewers had plenty of time. It's just that it wasn't a random sample. What if this is a liberal or conservative show? The data could be quite skewed. For 24, this is primarily a function notation question. For example, if we were to plug in an x into 5x squared minus 3, we would get f of x. But if we plug in x plus a into this same equation, then we get this as our result. So let's try that. We plug in x plus a like this, which I will expand using the box method, x squared, ax, and a squared. I might as well distribute the 5 as I rewrite this. So we have 5x squared plus 5ax plus 5ax plus 5a squared minus 3. So we can clean this up a little bit. And then I'm going to bring down this equation in red here to the right side. So I'll add 3 to both sides. I'm going to subtract 5x squared from both sides. And I'm left with 10ax plus 5a squared is equal to 30x plus 45. So it looks to me like a is going to be 3. So if I plugged in a 3 here, I'd get 30x. And if I plugged in a 3 here, I'd get 45. I could consider these separately like this, but the answer is that a is equal to 3, which was choice C. So 25, this type problem comes up, and if you remember how to do it, you don't need the diagram, but here it is. Here's a right triangle for right triangle trigonometry, and I marked this angle down here as x degrees, and it's equal to a, which means that the opposite over the hypotenuse is equal to a. So I'll put an a over here and a 1 over here. So if I look at the other options for sine, none of them are really going to be true. And for cosine, I need to take the cosine of this angle here. And that'll be equal to adjacent a over hypotenuse 1. So the cosine of whatever this angle is equal to a. Now how do I figure out that angle? Well, since this is a 90-degree angle, the other two are going to add up to 90. So the cosine of 90 minus x is going to give me whatever this is. And therefore the answer is C. 26 talks about a quadratic function. It models the height above the ground in feet x seconds after it had been launched vertically. So it looks like we're starting off 10 feet above the ground, and then over time we go up and then we go down. But they want to know the X intercept. So that's when this crosses 0 for the y value. And the only way y is going to be 0 is if we've already hit the ground. So the initial height would be the y-intercept, and then it goes up, 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 and hits the vertex, the maximum height, and then it goes down and down and down and hits the ground. And since y is height, that's what d is. That's our x-intercept. 27, we're looking at a polynomial function, and the function crosses the x-axis at exactly 2 points, a0 and b0. And both of these points are positive. So if you plugged in a and then you plugged in b to these respective factors, you would get 0 for each one of them. So plugging in a to x minus a checks out. Plugging in b to x minus b checks out. These others either have some addition somewhere in the problem, or they have an extra x out here in the front. That's why A is the correct answer. 28. Y is equal to 3x squared plus 6x plus 2. Which of the following characteristics of the graph is displayed as a constant or coefficient in the equation? So coefficients are the 3 and the 6, and a constant is this 2. But they're thinking in terms of y coordinates of the vertex and x and y intercepts, or the x intercept of the line of symmetry. Let's think about the intercepts and remember that for an x intercept, that's when y is 0, and for a y intercept, that's when x is 0. So if x was 0, these parts go away, and we're just left with 2, that constant. That's why C is the right answer. So 29 shows the rise in minimum wage since 1940 using a line of best fit. They want to know, what does it predict about the increase over the 70-year period? And each one of these choices is about the average increase for every year or every 10 years. So those are the two differences. Each year, every 10 years, and then they're all asking about the average increase. So the average increase is just the slope. And remember, we're not looking at the dots, we're looking at the line of best fit. So we can see that we went up about $6 over 70 years. So let's try to rule some out. Choice B says that the average increase in minimum wage was 50 cents for every year. So then it would have went up by $35, which is not true. Choice C says that every 10 years it went up almost 10 cents. So that would mean that it goes up 96 cents over 70 years. Or, well, 67 cents. But either way, it's not even close to enough. So if I consider $0.096 times 70 years, I get an increase of $6.72. And if I take 0.488 times 7 for 7 decades, I get $3.42. So A is the best choice. 30 wants us to find an equation of the line of best fit. So what I might do is pick 2 points, and I tried to pick 2 points that were somewhat pretty close to the actual line, and looked at their sales for those different temperatures. So the x is increasing by 6 and the y by 200. So if I take 200 divided by 6, I get 33, and that's my slope. So that rules out the first two. And what do you think my starting sales would be, 84 or 300? Well, if I just look from 24 to 12, let's say, I went down 400. And this is a linear relationship, so if I go another 12 to the left over 0, I'm going to go down another 400. So 84 is a lot more likely than 300 here. 31. In the xy plane above, the circle has center hk and radius 10. What is the value of k? So I can make a couple right triangles like this. And if I think about the distance between 4 and 20, that's 16. So it's going to be 8 for each one of these. So what is 10 squared minus 8 squared? And take the square root of that. That's going to give me the square root of 36, which is just going to be 6. So this one used the Pythagorean theorem from the formula page. So for 32, I have the key information for slope and intercept. My slope is going to be opposite reciprocal of negative 2/3 because they say it's perpendicular. So I'm going to write that out as 3/2. And if my y-intercept is negative 13, I write it like that. Then they give us this coordinate, so we're going to plug in a 10 for x. So 3/2 times 10 minus 13. So this is going to be 15 minus 13, which is just 2. So we have 4 different blood types, and then this rhesus factor, positive or negative. And they're saying, out of all the people who have a negative rhesus, they're chosen at random. So we're looking at this row, they say the probability that their blood type is B is 1 out of 9th. So 2 out of the total is equal to 1 over 9, which means that my total is going to be 18. So 7 plus 2 plus 1 plus x is 18. 10 plus x is 18. X is equal to 8. 34, I have to know the median. So if I cross off the biggest, and 1 from the smallest, and 2 from here, and 2 from there, and 1, 2, 3 from here, 1, 2, 3 from there, 1, 2, 1, 2, and if I keep going with this, I find that my median is 2. And they want to know how many games did I score that many goals. And if I follow that over, the answer is 9. So Gisela owed $15,500, but she had some deductions and it reduced the amount of tax she owed. So the actual amount she owes is $13,175. So what I would do next is divide this new amount by the old amount, and we get 0.85, which tells us this is 85% of the original. So how many percent did I go down from 100? 15%. Well, I guess it's just 15. (36) The system above has no solutions. That's key because when a system has no solutions, that means that the lines are parallel. They never cross, which means that the slopes are equal. So to figure out the slopes, I can solve both of these equations for y and go from there. So I'll start with the top one. I'll add a half y to both sides and subtract 12 from both sides, and then I'm going to multiply everything by 2. So this is my new top equation, which tells me my slope is 1.5. So the bottom equation, I'm going to add by to both sides, subtract 9 from both sides, which looks very similar to a. Whoops. And to get y by itself, I'm going to divide everything by b. So I'm left with this, and my slope is then a over b. So a over b has to be equal to 1.5, or 6 over 4. But I guess reduced, that'd be 3 over 2. So 1.5. Last two questions are about this table. International tourist arrivals in millions across 2 different years in different countries. 37, they ask how much greater was the median number for 2013 than the median number in 2012. So in 2013, if I cross off the biggest and the smallest until I'm left with one value, I have 47.7. If I do the same on the left, notice they're not quite in order here. I get 46.4. And these are in millions. So to the nearest tenth, 1.3. To subtract the bigger minus the smaller. 38, the number of international tourist arrivals in Russia in 2012 was 13.5% greater than 2011. So based on that percentage, what was the actual amount additional of tourists 2012 compared to 2011? Well, our 2012 arrivals was 24.7 million, and we went up by 13.5%. So to figure out this missing value, we can take 24.7 million and divide that by 1.135, because that shows an increase of 13.5%. So this gives us 21.8 million if you round to the nearest tenth. So the difference between these two values, 24.7 and 21.8, is 2.9 million. And they want that rounded to the nearest whole number. 3 is the answer.